Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service in special partnership with Alaska Public Media on this Wednesday, February 16th, 2022. And as always, if you want additional weather information, you can always go to weather.gov. You'll come upon a point and click forecast map, and it'll allow you to interact for anywhere in the country, including Alaska and Hawaii in the lower left. And right now, this afternoon, we see a lot of color there through the nation's midsection. Another winter storm is going to produce, some heavier snows and mixed precipitation from southeast Kansas, northern Oklahoma, on up into the lower Great Lakes, southern Michigan. Also, though, as we get into Thursday, there's a potential for severe thunderstorms, some that could produce tornadoes in portions of the Tennessee and lower Mississippi Valley. So keep that in mind. But again, if you want to check up on friends and family anywhere in the country, you can get the latest weather forecasts, watches, warnings, and advisories. And looking at the weather headlines, we continue to see a parade of North Pacific lows that cross into the Bering and occasionally up into the Gulf, and they're producing these rounds of precipitation. This has been going on for some time now, not much of a change in the overall pattern. I think, though, as we head up through the next couple of weeks toward the end of February, the next week or two, we're going to see milder temperatures. These lows are going to bring milder air up across the southwest and south central areas of the state. I'll highlight that in a moment. Overnight tonight into Thursday, there's a winter storm warning for the eastern Alaska range. That includes the passes like Isabel, Mentasta, the cutoff there at Tok. There could be as much as 2 feet of snow in some of those higher elevations, along with blowing and drifting snow that can make travel very difficult, especially through those passes. Also, an avalanche warning is in effect for Hatcher Pass till 7 p.m. this Wednesday evening for snow that fell today, and conditions aren't going to improve. In fact, upwards to another foot of snow could fall tomorrow, Thursday, into Thursday evening. So those avalanche warnings will likely be extended or at least revisited. So stay tuned there. And overall, above normal temperatures and precipitation could occur here across much of the state, heading up here over the next couple of weeks, going up through the end of this month. And taking a look at the current advisories and warnings, starting with the warnings, that area red there, the eastern Alaska range, as I just highlighted. And then wind chill warnings in effect for along the eastern Arctic coast, where wind chills could be 50 to even near 60 below. We've seen some daytime temperatures there only in the 20s with nighttime lows 30s below. And then along the west coast, from Point Hope down to just northwest of Kotzebue along the lower Chukchi Sea, as well as the Seward Peninsula, east side of the Norton Sound, and as well as St. Lawrence Island, wind chill advisories for tonight into Thursday morning. Nothing really new there. We continue to see winter weather advisories for some lighter snowfall and blowing snow from, say, around Galena, area of Grayling on up through the Tanana Valley, the lower, or I should go up the Yukon Valley, through Bettles, Fort Yukon, Fairbanks, and the 40-mile Gold Country. And then just recently added includes the lower Kuskokwim area, including Bethel on over toward Aniak and Sleet Mute, where we're going to see another round of snow later tonight and Thursday work its way across the southwest interior and then crossing into south central areas of the state. So there will be additional advisories likely around Cook Inlet, perhaps into the Copper River Basin as we go into tomorrow and tomorrow night. Looking at some webcams from across the state from earlier this afternoon, Dead Horse was clear, 24 below. Coldest temperature in the state did get down to 45 below zero at Fort Yukon this morning. Warmest temperature was 49 yesterday at Port Huyden there on the Alaska Peninsula. Isabel Pass, there's a little light snow there, lower ceilings and things shaping up, but again, a winter storm warning tonight into Thursday for well over a foot of snow and blowing snow to occur there. And as we check out Anchorage, at least 3-4 inches of snow fell in downtown Anchorage overnight into early this morning, but it's transitioned to some light rain and fog with temperatures above freezing, 36 in the early mid-afternoon. Juneau, similarly, light rain and fog, a few degrees warmer at 39 degrees. And Juneau is on the verge of setting a record for precipitation for January and February. Already, February is in fourth place as the most precipitation recorded in Juneau, so we still got a couple weeks to go there. And looking at the precipitation forecast from 3 a.m. this Wednesday morning through 3 a.m. this coming Sunday morning, February 20th, we see these weather systems that are coming in off the Bering and the Gulf. The bulk of the precipitation is the southwest interior, especially along there, the west side of the Alaska Range, and then coming in there through the Susitna Valley and then across Prince William Sound, the coastal mountains there along the Gulf Coast and the intercoastal mountains there of the Panhandle is where the greatest amount of precipitation. This is liquid equivalent. Some areas could see 3-5 inches of precipitation. That would include snow. It's just referring to it as liquid equivalent. And then finally, looking at the satellite imagery, we have the one system working its way eastward today, and then another one out there approaching the southwest coast, the lower Kuskokwim Delta, and moving through the eastern Aleutians into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. And you can see well-defined circulation of the low just west of Adak right now, and that feature just kind of sitting and spinning out there toward the western half of the Aleutians. But nevertheless, it's an active pattern. The lows that are currently this afternoon working their way across the state, we have one there in the lower Yukon, another one that extends back through south central areas, and then back out toward the western half of the Aleutians. And another impulse will be working its way eastward tonight, bringing in more snow to the southwest there, because that's why I said those winter weather advisories have been newly issued, and that snow will spread eastward across the south central interior as we go through the day on Thursday along that front. Along the immediate coast, as I'll show you, temperatures are going to be rather mild, above freezing, so precipitation there will be generally in the form of rain. And as we go to Friday, we just see that parade, that continuation of weak lows from the lower Yukon across Prince William Sound back toward the southwest coast, with yet another low back there just southwest there of the central Aleutians. Just a quick check of where are the coldest temperatures. Northern half of the state could be down around 43 below at Fort Yukon again for the coldest temperature come Thursday morning. Temperatures are generally above freezing in southwest Alaska and the Panhandle. And look at come Thursday afternoon, we will see temperatures above freezing, some 40s, lower 40s there, the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, on over through a good portion of the Panhandle, including the inner channels. Not quite as cold in the north, but still that's where the coldest air is residing. Friday morning lows will still be some widespread teens and 20s below, isolated 30s below up to the north, but overnight lows generally around or above freezing, southwest Alaska, the Alaska Peninsula, Aleutians, as well as the Panhandle. And then Friday afternoon, we expect temperatures again to be above freezing across the southern third of the state, including the southeast Panhandle. And more specifically, lows Thursday morning generally at or above freezing there for the Panhandle, and then out along the southwest portion of the state, going down along the Alaska Peninsula. Temperatures steady to slowly rising there around Anchorage, and we should get above freezing again in the Anchorage area for Thursday afternoon. Some lower mid-40s there in the Panhandle, as well as Kodiak Island and going southward from King Salmon, Dillingham areas. Friday morning lows still similarly near or above freezing along the coastal areas and into southwest Alaska and the Panhandle. And then afternoon highs Friday should still be above freezing in many areas along and just inland from the coast. And coldest temperatures Thursday morning there across the north could be 43 below at Fort Yukon, and then daytime highs, teens, 20s below, especially there Arctic Village and Fort Yukon being the coldest locations. Not quite as cold, though, come Friday morning. And then on Friday afternoon, temperatures at least getting back up above freezing along the Yukon River basin. And looking at southwest Alaska there in the southwest, temperatures above freezing overnight, creeping upward there in Bristol Bay and the west side of the Alaska Range. Thursday afternoon, we expect temperatures above freezing, lower Kuskokwim up there on the west side of the Alaska Range and much of the Alaska Peninsula out through the Aleutians, 42 there at Kodiak, 43 Dutch Harbor. Friday morning lows generally near or above freezing in that end of the Alaska Range in the Bristol Bay, Dillingham areas, and daytime highs Friday afternoon should still be above freezing, with the exception there further to the north, 10 above at Eamonnok. So here is the extended temperature outlook for 6 to 10 days centered on February 24th. That's the period February 22nd through the 26th, taking us up to the end of the month. What's notable a pretty significant anomaly, meaning the likelihood of above normal temperatures over southwest and south central Alaska are likely, including much of the state. So the colder temperatures that have resided the last week across northern Alaska are certainly going to relax and give way to this warming trend and overall pattern, because we have a series of lows that lift out of the North Pacific into the Bering and then occasionally up into the Gulf. And this is going to bring moist, warmer air, which translates to a threat of above normal precipitation. And where the air is colder, especially farther inland, it'll fall as periods of snow, sometimes fairly good accumulating snows. Areas where you're further south near the coast, you're either going to see plain old rain or some in between those areas, a transition between snow and rain or freezing rain and those sorts of mixed precipitation. So pattern will remain active here as we go up through the end of the month, and it is definitely looking milder with above normal precipitation.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's now time for your aviation weather. And if you have a flight plan taking us through the end of the week, Thursday into Friday, we are looking at IFR conditions across at least the southern half of the state, especially along and south of the Alaska Range, as well as out over much of the Bering, western central Aleutians, and up along at least the eastern half of the Arctic coast. And as we go into Thursday, we're going to be watching low pressure, the main low pressure out in the central Bering, but a new piece of energy and impulse will come across the southwest and then reemerge by Friday morning and form a low pressure in the northwest Gulf along the Kenai Peninsula. So we expect IFR conditions to increase across the southern half of the state, and then spreading eastward again into the Panhandle by early Friday morning. Also, we expect more IFR conditions there coming in off the Bering into the southwest. This is going to involve a variety of precipitation in the colder air further north of frontal boundary in the lows. We expect snow, but then in transition into the milder air, we're going to see areas of rain as well as a mix of freezing rain, sleet, and snow. So into Friday afternoon, we expect rather extensive IFR conditions along the southwest coast, Bristol Bay, on up through the Yukon Valley, Alaska Range, and on over toward the north central Gulf into at least the coastal mountains of the inner portion of the Panhandle. Past conditions, Anativik Pass will be MVFR, becoming VFR on Thursday, and that'll be the case. Adigan Pass, look for conditions to become VFR by afternoon. And then generally speaking here all along the Alaska Range, it's going to be IFR with that moisture in place in areas of snow and some mixed precipitation. And as we go up through Rainy Pass and into Windy Pass, IFR conditions expected throughout Thursday, and further east, both Isabel and Mentasta will see IFR conditions as well. Further south and west, Tanita will see IFR conditions, and there around Portage Pass, IFR conditions will rule, though I can't rule out a few pockets of MVFR overall with that moisture spreading eastward across the region. That will induce those IFR conditions. And then on Thursday, Chilkoot and White will still hold on to MVFR conditions. And looking at freezing levels, they do come up over the Gulf as high as 6,000 feet there out over the northern Gulf, as high as 8,000 feet near Haida Gwaii, and the 2,000-foot freezing line extends up in through at least the western arm of the Alaska Range at Bristol Bay area. And we expect with that milder air in place over the Gulf and in through portions of the southeast Bering, the greatest threat for icing will be between 4,000 and 14,000 feet there in the southwest and along the Alaska Peninsula. And also with the low pressure that's out there in the central Bering north of the central Aleutians between 3,000 and 12,000 feet. And then some isolated moderate icing possible over the Panhandle between 6,000 and 16,000 feet. Upper level jet stream winds at 30,000 feet shows an anticyclonically curved jet structure where we have a ridge of high pressure from the Gulf down into the North Pacific, and then winds on the order of 130 knots there south of the Kodiak Island. And then as we round this ridge, 150 knot northwest winds in northwest Canada, bringing it down to 9,000 feet. We see winds over the Panhandle from the west about 50 knots. 65 knot wind core there at 9,000 feet southeast and south of Kodiak Island, and generally through the eastern Aleutians in the tip of the Alaska Peninsula about 40-45 knot winds that extend up into the southwest portion of the state. And then on the 3,000-foot level, there's a low-pressure circulation in the central bearing, and we see winds out of the east there through the middle Yukon Valley into the Seward Peninsula, bearing straight on the order of 50, 55 knots. And then also we see winds circulating around the base of that low over the central eastern Aleutians on the order of 40 to 50 knots, and also an area of 40 to 50 knot winds from the southwest in the vicinity of Kodiak Island. And this all translates to the potential for some considerable moderate turbulences. The areas that are highlighted in orange include portions of the interior, westward through the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, as well as an isolated pocket there in the southern portion of the Panhandle, but more importantly, an area that runs from the base of Cook Inlet through Kodiak Island along the Alaska Peninsula, extending out into the eastern and central Aleutians between the surface and 4,000 feet. So there's your flight weather, and if you do have a flight plan, please check the latest conditions and forecasts. Have a safe flight.
We have a big solar flare coming in, so we're out here on an aurora hunt. It's a CME, it's a dynamite, coronal mass ejection. It's when the sun, it kicks off energy and these explosions that are larger than the Earth, explosion type things, coming off of sunspots. And if that energy is pointing straight at the Earth, it gets caught up in our magnetic field, and that energy, electrons, come down our magnetic field, collide with oxygen up there about 50 or a couple hundred miles high, and that's what generates the northern lights. My job as the photographer and the aurora hunter is to be in position, you know, location, location, location. And I like to think I'm composing. Mother Nature, it's a bit of a teamwork thing, you know, she's got to put on the show, but I have to be in the right position and of course with the right tools and the know-how. I've stopped keeping track of how much time I spend out here in terms of hours. It's more in terms of weeks or months, or at this point years now. You know, it was always in me. Even when I was a kid growing up in the lower 48, I would spend nights sleeping on our trampoline, just staring at the stars. I'm in 4th grade and I'm going, wow, look at those stars. And I'd see how many nights in a row I could sleep on the trampoline. And I think my record was 23 nights in a row. So I was doing kind of strange things for an Iowa country boy. I can remember specifically the very first time I saw the Northern Lights. It was 1989, the peak of the solar cycle, and I was going to graduate school in Laramie, Wyoming. And all of a sudden we had heard the Northern Lights were out. It's like, what are those? I'd never really seen them before. And my goodness gracious, we were on top of a mountain in the Laramie Range and they were turning blood red. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And the very first picture I took, that was 1990. Now, an old film camera, Pentax K1000 on a plastic Kmart tripod. Took 2 shots on slide film and got them back. And I thought, oh my gosh, this beautiful green thing swirling about. And from that moment, I was hooked. When I realized that you could preserve the auroras on film, I just experimented a ton. I'd had a heaping stack of slides, the no good ones. The experiments gone wrong, you know, too dark, fuzzy, out of focus, too light. I had this huge garbage can full of excess slide film, and that was just the learning curve. Well, when I go out here, it's all about getting the shot. And my wife and I, we've called it the hero shot. But the hero shot is the one where you just come home and you go, look at this. And everyone goes, wow, and you feel like a hero. It's a wonderful feeling, you know. It's good for the ego, of course. It's good for the business. But if you kind of strip that away, it's good for what's inside you, because that's really the hero moment in nature. And Mother Nature's putting on this show that is just mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. When I first resigned from my day job, that was in 1996, and decided I wanted to become a full-time aurora hunter, my goal from that moment and to this day still is to get one hero shot a year. I figured, and I'm talking the kind that somebody wants to buy from you and hang on their wall, where the auroras are extremely bright, very active, turning colors, where you can't believe your eyes. If you get to preserve a little sample of that with a photograph, well, it's what we call the hero shot. Wow, what a feeling. I mean, you're elevated, levitating, you are lifted up. Your spirits are so high that I love that feeling. And I think I get that so much from seeing cool things in nature that I will go way out of my way to find that. And I can, the next day, well, I'll be just laying there thinking about it and thinking how lucky I was, or how fortunate. Of course, I just spent 2 weeks sitting there staring at the sky and not seeing anything, so you got to remember that luck is kind of a relative term, but I still just feel incredibly lucky to be even in a position to where I could have been there, taken a photograph of it, and just mainly experienced it. Well, that feeling could last for days.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and we conclude our day with the marine weather and sea ice edge. And the most notable thing is that any strips of ice that should break off the pack ice, we don't anticipate much movement here, despite the fact we are going to have some areas of low pressure and frontal systems work their way across the Bering. Nevertheless, the strips of ice that do break free, at least along the edges there, the water temperatures, air temperatures are warm enough that we're not expecting any ability for it to refreeze. So we're in a relatively mild pattern, especially there through the lower portion of the Bering Sea. And coming up here, looking at the southeast panhandle on Thursday, inner channels will see winds southeast to south 15 knots, waves generally a few feet. On the outer coast, look for southwest winds 15 to 20 knots and waves 9 to 11 feet. On Friday, winds will be out of the southeast and south 25 knots for the inner channels, and waves right up around 4 or 5 feet. For the outer coast, winds will be southwest to south from Craig on up through Gustavus, turning more westerly 30 to 35 knots there, Yakutat westward, and waves generally 10 to 12 feet. Across the northwest Gulf, we'll see winds off the Kenai from the south-southeast, 20 to as high as 30 knots, waves about 9 feet. Strongest coming through the mouth there of Cook Inlet, 35-knot gales with 9-foot waves. And Prince William Sound, easterly winds, 15 knots, waves 2 feet. On Friday, winds in the open waters of the northwest Gulf off the Kenai will generally be between 30 and 35 knots from the west, with waves running right around 10, 11 feet. Areas of Cook Inlet, there at the mouth of Cook Inlet, southwest winds 15 knots, waves maybe 4 feet. Southwest winds in Prince William Sound, and waves there a couple of feet. Across Kodiak Island on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, south winds 25 to 30 knots. 7-foot waves, Shelikof Strait, as much as 10 to 15 feet, highest there off of Sand Point. And then ice-free areas north of Cold Bay, southwest winds 20 knots, waves 5 feet. On Friday, look for generally southwest to west winds 25 to 30 knots across the region. 7-foot waves, Shelikof Strait, running around 12 to 14 feet on the North Pacific side, and as high as 13 feet in the vicinity north of Cold Bay. Across the Aleutians, winds will be out of the southwest throughout the central eastern Aleutians, around 30 to 35 knots. Waves around 15 to 19 feet on the North Pacific side, 10 to 15 feet on the Bering side. turning more west to northwest once you get around Kiska and toward Shemya. For Friday, winds will be out of the southwest, 25 to 30 knots over the eastern Aleutians, turning southerly 25 to 30 knots central Aleutians, and then southeast to east 30 to 35 knots across the western half of the Aleutians. Waves generally running 12 to 15 feet on the North Pacific side and 9 to 13 feet on the Bering side. Across the western and southwest coast, ice is in place. Again, we don't expect a lot of movement, though winds generally out of the northeast, 25 to 30 knots over the ice, but more southerly on the other side of a frontal system there at St. Paul, St. George, 25 knot south winds, 10-foot waves there. And then for Friday, winds will be out of the northwest there, especially south of St. Lawrence Island to Nunavik Island at 25 to 30 knots, and look for westerly winds there around St. Paul, St. George at 25 knots with 12-foot waves. Along the Arctic coast, winds will be from around 20 to as high as 30 knots at Kaktovik. And then further west, we see west to southwest winds, Utqiagvik down toward Point Lay, turning more north-northwesterly, 15 to 25 knots there through the lower Chukchi Sea, accelerating upwards to the north-northeast to 35 knots there on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. And then for Friday, look for winds along the Arctic coast to shift more to the northeast at 15 to 20 knots. Northeast accelerating 25 to 30 knots along the northwest coast, and then turning more northerly 25 to 30 knots through the Bering Strait and into the north side of St. Lawrence Island. And for tonight into early Thursday morning, we continue to see a low north of the central Aleutians, a weak low just along the Kenai, and a high pressure centered up along the north slope. For Thursday afternoon, a frontal boundary will have areas of snow and mixed precipitation along it across the southern half of the state, with rain primarily along the Gulf Coast and extending out through the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians. And for Friday, weak low pressure will continue along the southern third of the state with areas of snow and mixed precipitation and then rain along the coast. So have a good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.